Hi everyone, welcome to another session of Expert Talks. Today we are joined by Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, former Ambassador of India to Jordan, Libya and Malta. He has also served in Indian missions in Bangladesh, Mongolia, United States, Russia, Sweden and Nigeria. Currently, he is Secretary of Association of Indian Diplomats. He is also a member of the All India Management Association and is part of Oxford and Cambridge societies. You're welcome, sir. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas.
So moving on to our first question. India has followed a non-alignment policy since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Even before that, India has been following a non-alignment policy. But to be specific, Russia-Ukraine conflict. How long India can continue to not take sides in this international issue? What would be India's strategy to maintain this neutrality?
Well, you have rightly mentioned that India did follow the non-alignment policy immediately post-independence. And even before that, it was very clear, given the fact that we were a colonized nation, and immediately after the Second World War, when India became independent, as you know, the situation changed completely and the world was divided between two power blocks. And that was a Cold War scenario. And in that kind of a scenario, India thought its interests will be best served by taking a principled position on key and fundamental issues of foreign policy, staying away from their conflicts. And India was working to help liberate very large number of countries. And that's when the NAM, non-aligned movement, was born. They were able to serve their interests by not aligning with either of the two powers or the two power blocks. But once the Soviet Union disintegrated, the world has changed into more or less a unipolar system. And there are other powers like Russia and China, but they are way below the rank as far as the superpower or hyperpower status is concerned. Now, in this kind of a scenario, when a unilateralism directly militates against the policy of India, which propagates multilateralism, which propagates a rule-based order, basically, and where the UN Charter is upheld. Now, in that kind of a situation, you can imagine it is very difficult for a country of 1.3 billion or 1/6 of the world population, the largest democracy in the world, to go along with a sham when you can see the writing on the wall. The problem is that India did not take any side in this, does not mean that India is neutral. India was not neutral because India was on the side of the peace. India was on the side of the dialogue. It was on the side of diplomacy. It wanted the cessation of hostilities. It wanted the UN Charter and this territorial sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine and all other nations fully complied with and protected. So we cannot say that this was just that we are sitting on the fence or we took this kind of position. Now, as you know, that all the countries, basically major countries, approached India and wanted India to condemn Russia. Now, if you were to condemn Russia, and I know it is not a very good way to look at things, that somebody else has made a mistake, then you condone the other mistake also. But in this century itself, in the last 20 years, you can just go back to the Ukraine war, then you go back to the Iraq war, then you go back to the Libyan invasion by the Americans. Or so for that matter, what we see today is that the same powers, Americans and others, Western powers, had actually taken the unilateralism in their hand and did what they wanted to do. Now exactly the same thing that they are trying to, Russia tried to protect itself, saying that its security, which is genuine to some extent, even though one can argue against it as well, that this war and invasion in 21st century is no way to deal with it. But at the same time, you are aware that the same countries which are now today condemning Russia have been leading invasion in Iraq for no fault of We have seen that there was no reason. They manufactured evidence to invade. In Libya, very similar situation. Today we are seeing Syria, Yemen, everywhere. So all the hotspots are where the big powers have tried to play their geopolitical game. So India has, as you know, for the first time in its history, has abstained at least 12 times on a single issue in a way, right? But it stands for a position. So its position is very clearly explained to all the interlocutors, and they have very well understood, be it the European Union, be it the European leaders, be it the Americans, or be the Quad leaders. So all our partners and friends understand that India is a country which likes to take a principled position in consonance with the real rule of law, and has never been an invader and does not support the invaders. So India's position is not a blanket check for Russia or a blanket condemnation for the others. Because in this case, if you were to see, it is not only India, but there were many other countries who were very close allies of the Americans who did not go along with the American position. So we are seeing that there, once again, the world is on the brink of Cold War 2.0, and therefore India will have to take its own lead and its own position.
Yes, sir. So one of my another question is that our Honorable Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar sir, was traveling to Europe for various conferences and bilateral and multilateral meetings. And during, I think, 2 of those conferences, he faced questions from the European media and also from the mediator of those conferences about India buying Russian oil and how India is funding the Russian war machine. And our Honorable Foreign Minister replied in a very, professional way, in a diplomatic way, that India is only buying oil from Russia in a year, which Europe buys for an afternoon. So why is Europe trying to, or even let's say Western powers, trying to focus on actions of India regarding Russian conflict, or let's say buying oil from Russia, rather than focusing on their own opinion and their own actions on this point?
Well, number one, you must understand the sole purpose of the foreign policy of any country is to serve its interests, strategic and otherwise, the best possible manner in a given situation. So when the Honorable Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, very clearly articulated his position, he was showing the mirror to them that hypocrisy is not the way that we are going to work together. You have to really call a spade. When you are funding the Russians, if there was a war machine of Russia, anybody was funding, it is the Americans and the Europeans. They are buying oil and gas worth over $1 billion because they can't live without it every day. So that means in 90 or 100 days, they have given more than $100 billion to the Russians. And how much does India buy? And even if it buys, for the matter, we do not recognize unilateral sanctions. There are no sanctions by the United Nations. So India only goes by the United Nations Security Council sanctions. That is the key fundamental point. But at the same time, there is a real politic also. Sometimes what happens, because the whole financial system is governed by the Western countries, especially the United States and the SWIFT, etc. So we see that it becomes difficult for the Indian companies to work with the countries that are sanctioned. And that's where you have to find a way out, and which is being worked out. So India rupee ruble trade. So I'm happy that we agreed to, and Russians also are looking for a market. And we cannot just dump our relationship with a country just because he had a unfriendly stance with the other country. So this was precisely what he said was absolutely correct. And why the Europeans, Americans are doing it? Because they thought that India now has been working closely with them in the Quad. They have very good strategic partnership with the United States and with the European countries and the European Union. So therefore, India will toe their line. India does not toe anybody's line. It has never toed the line. It has its own line. It works for our own interest. Whatever is in our interest, we will look after that. If the Russians are, when the oil crisis, the world is having energy security, food insecurities, the fertilizer problems. Now, in that situation, a country like India, if it has to buy oil at $130, you can imagine that what impact it will have on our economy, or what kind of a problem it will have for our society. So India has to protect against that. So in that way, if the Russians are going to sell us the oil at 30% discount, 40% discount, every dollar that we save, we can use it for our social development or for our security needs. So we have to look after our own interests. We don't have to care about what the world thinks. And that's why in Slovakia, when the minister was asked, he says that the Europeans think that the world should worry about them all the time, but they should never worry about what happens in the world. So he was very right. I mean, their problem cannot be our problem because it's created by them. Had they tried to address the main concerns of the Russians about the security, not expanding NATO beyond a point, as there was understandings from 1997, we would not have reached the situation. But it is the larger geopolitics and geoeconomics which is playing out. And so we have to look at it from that way. And we are not duffers that we cannot understand their games.
Yes, sir. Your points are very, very important and also, significant from the recent international relations point of view. So moving from Eurasia to the Pacific and Indo-Pacific, China and North Korea have been increasing their warfare capabilities recently, with special focus on Japan and Taiwan. And this has led to an increase in tension in the Indo-Pacific. How will India respond to this development?
See, one thing one has to understand is that China is our biggest neighbor and a difficult neighbor. It will remain a challenge for India in the times to come. China looks at India as probably the only country, and especially after the Russia-Ukraine war, which has an independent foreign policy. And after Galwan, it has also seen that India can stand up against China. So it knows that India cannot be taken for granted. And India also knows that China will continue with its nefarious designs, with its hegemonistic policies, whether it is in Indo-Pacific or whether on our borders or in the maritime. As you know, we have two problems, not one. We have a land border problem and we have a maritime problem with China. So we have to contend on those. And if you add Pakistan to that, then you have a third dimension to it. So therefore, we have to be extremely cautious. And the only way to do so is what we are doing right now. We know how to manage China, as it is said. Earlier, we followed a policy of competition with cooperation. So we are going along with other friends also, other countries, which are going to collaborate with us in ensuring that there is a rule-based order that happens. That's the important part, is in the maritime domain, there is a rule-based order to which China as an independent country adheres to. India does not believe in containment of China. It has never done so. Prime Minister Modi had spoken in Shangri-La in Singapore, and when he clearly identified India's policy, and that has been again and again repeated in bilateral discussions with China, as well as in our multilateral domain. That has been our policy. So we are not looking to fight with China, but if China invades us, we are not going to sit pretty and welcome them. We are going to give them back the way they deserve. So therefore, I don't think that we have to worry about it, but we have to focus much more on our economic strength, on our defense capabilities, on our cyber capabilities, on our high-tech capabilities. They are extremely important for us. And we have to be part of the integral value and global supply chains, which we have seen during the pandemic. They were broken down, and how difficult it was for us, the world to manage, and India more so, because we are the fastest growing economy. No economy grows in isolation. So you need to have the assured supply chains for criticals. And that's why our Quad with Australia, Japan, and USA comes as a friendly partner to us. And so are the many other countries in the world.
Yes, sir. So sticking with the topic of China itself, since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, China has been praising India's independent foreign policy and how it stands up to West when the West asks India to do various things. So various diplomats, Chinese diplomats, and even the Chinese foreign minister has praised India's foreign policies and even looked for building a better relationship with India when the Chinese foreign minister flight to India out of nowhere without anyone knowing on a one fine day. So with this in hand, and also the geopolitical situation in Eurasia in hand, the trilateral relationship of Russia, India, China, or as we call it RIC, is getting more and more important, mainly in the focus of economic point of view regarding SWIFT and sanctions and all. And even the Russian foreign minister, Honorable Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov, has mentioned about the importance of RIC in the future, in the coming future. So what do you think is the future of Russia, India, China, and this trilateral relationship?
I remember I was in Moscow at the time when Primakov launched this idea of RIC, Russia, India, China. And it was being perceived in the West as a bloc. Another bloc which is emerging, a stronger bloc. Imagine Russia, India, China getting together in that sense. So that they think in the only security and military perspective. So for them, it was like that. But for India, even then, RIC or the BRICS or this, they are more economic pedestals for doing better for our people, using each other's technology, the market space, and collaborations. Eventually, China has been now this year it has been, I think, the largest trading partner with unprecedented levels of trade taking place, $125 billion with China. Russia also remains our very strong study partner. So it's natural to be together. But then we have a problem with China, because China is not a straight line or works straightforward. It is always in the labyrinthine manner. He tries to bite you, want India to remain confined to the South Asian landscape. And there also it is creating the string of pearl strategy it has. So competition is important between India and China. But whether you will allow the competition to become into a conflict, that is the challenge. And that's why when India works with China in the format of competition with cooperation, then we are able to move forward. So when in the Russia-Ukraine context, India says the hostilities should cease, the dialogue diplomacy should take place, the peace should prevail, it is doing the same thing in practice with China. Even though China came into India, tried to invade, and India stopped it there, there were 20 soldiers died in Galwan, but India continued to stop China there. But at the same time, it has not stopped talking to China. The dialogue mechanisms are still working. So preferences for diplomacy and no war at this stage, because that will be disastrous for everybody, whoever fights. The results of Russia-Ukraine war are going to change the whole world system. The global system is going to completely change. First time we are seeing that the financial instruments in the West, whether it is SWIFT or whether it is banking channels or whether it is exchange mechanisms, have been used as a weapon against Russia or any state for that matter, sanctions themselves, but these are unprecedented sanctions. Likewise, when Russia uses energy as a weapon or food as a weapon, so we are seeing a very different kind of a dynamic evolving on the global scale. Likewise, the payment mechanisms, people are losing their trust in SWIFT. Because see, if Russia's reserves of $630 billion are confiscated by the Americans because it was in their banks or in the dollar denominated, that does not give a lot of confidence to their friends or their foes or competitors. Now you have to diversify your risks. And that is where you are seeing India dealing in rupee-ruble trade, India trying to do with yuan, RuPay cards, all over you are trying to develop in national currencies. Whether it happens in the BRICS or any other domain remains to be seen, or bilaterally. So barter is becoming more fashionable today to avoid the risks of third party or third party system. But what I look at it is that post-Ukraine war, we will see most likely a new financial architecture, competing financial architecture coming together on play, probably led by China.
Okay, sir. So for the last question from the Indo-Pacific side, after this we will move on to the West Asia. So for the last question from the Indo-Pacific side, AUKUS, as we know, Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America, that alliance mainly focuses on supplying Australia with nuclear powered submarines. And that is expected to be a deterrent force against China in the Indo Pacific region. But some analysts and international relations experts are saying that there is a high possibility that this move can trigger an arms race in the Indo Pacific. What are the possibilities of an arms race in the Indo Pacific and how India will respond to it?
Well, we are not looking at arms race as a constant. It is not something that happens today or tomorrow. Many years ago, you did not even have a pistol, right? Then you had the latest carbines. Then you had the most sophisticated missile system. Now you are having autonomous weapon systems. Now in the Indo-Pacific, nuclear submarines are already, American submarines are already there, right? The Australia, USA, and UK, they have security relation defense partnership acts. They have been defense partners. They have agreements with one another to protect. So therefore, what they are doing is natural. Why the controversy actually arose was because of France, because France is also an Indo-Pacific power, and the deal Australia cancelled with France and gave it to the UK. So that's why this is a major problem, and we are looking at another 10 years from now, by which time the nuclear submarines will actually be deployed. But definitely, China is today the largest country which is in shipping area. It has the largest number of ships that it is producing, and it is already upping its technological advantages and military heft. It is already the fourth largest supplier of military weapon systems and all in the world, and it is moving more in the space and I would say technological domain. So what cyber security capabilities and all that. Now, in that situation, no doubt race has never stopped. The Americans are the ones who walked out of the ABM treaty. They are the ones who are got a start one talk. So when they are not, nobody wants to adhere to this at the same time, and then they expect non-nuclear states or the nuclear states that are not declared nuclear states to be complying with all the regulations. So naturally, there will be an increase because China has felt threat of this. But in another way, I look at it in a different way, because Quad was being, although its name is Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, it does have exercises and all that in this. But at the same time, I do not see, or a good thing that has happened by AUKUS coming into this, that heat of the security part has been taken away from Quad. So from India's perspective, it is a good development.
Okay, so now moving on to the West Asia. The new I2U2 grouping, consisting of India, Israel, UAE, and the USA, will hold its first virtual meeting in July 2022. Several reports suggest that economic cooperation, food security, and even military cooperation are going to be part of the discussions. How will I2U2 change the diplomatic landscape in the Middle East?
Well, between you and me, frankly, I don't see it's going to change a great landscape in any way. Because, see, from our point of view, UAE, US, and Israel, all three are our strategic partners. So it was natural to collaborate with them. UAE is our fourth largest trading partner today. We have just signed in a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with them. They have signed a first ever FTA with Israel recently. We are negotiating with the USA. USA has a special relationship with Israel already, and Israel's security is paramount as far as the US foreign policy is concerned. Today, under the Abraham Accords, UAE and Israel have been working very, very closely, and India has welcomed them. So what is happening in this is that the technology, the capital, the manpower, and the overall, I would say, the American advantage are all being combined in this grouping. Now, this is obviously looking at increasing trade, enhancing trade, technology transfer, creating institutional frameworks, and I don't know. Security is, we have a defense security pact with the UAE, And we are part of the Quad, and we have bilateral agreements in defense sector with the United States also. But each one has a very different kind of a take. Now, Israel and US, obviously, defense-wise, they are the closest, right, in this whole thing. So in one way or the other, the defense security component comes in. But since challenges are many in the Middle East, now next month, President Biden is coming into to meet Saudis. But the countries in the region are a little bit upset and not so sure whether the Americans will continue to stand with them. So they are not putting all their eggs in one basket. What they are trying to do is they're trying to work with China, work with Russia, and that is the reason when President Biden tried to call the leaders of Saudi Arabia and UAE, they refused to take their call. Or asking them to increase the pump more oil, that they are not agreeing to do that. So there are these problems in that. So I think that this is a very good structure, which will provide India another opening into the region in a quadrilateral format. But if you think that it is going to be a game changer in some way, I doubt it.
Okay, sir. So to our last question. For the last few days, Saudi Arabia and Turkey has been trying to build a new relationship, a stronger relationship with a distant objective of having a unilateral West Asia, as we can see. So, how is this going to impact the role or the influence of the United States in that region, in the West Asia region?
Well, precisely because of what US has done, or the way it left Afghanistan overnight and started reducing its footprint in the Middle East, or at least that's how they perceive, or its lack of response to Houthi attacks on Saudi installations, ineffectiveness to prevent that, or the UAE attacks by the Houthis, or going closer to Iran through the JCPOA. All these issues have created a certain kind of a perception in the region among the major Gulf powers that US no longer interested in it and is no longer the security guarantor in the region. So therefore, what you are seeing with Turkey, or what you are seeing with Egypt and Turkey, you are seeing between Saudi Arabia and Qatar blockade lifting, or you are seeing Saudi Arabia and Iran talking. So all these kind of rapprochement that is taking place within the region is essentially because of one single factor, and that factor is that the US is stepping back. So when otherwise the region has a lot of complexities, as you know. The complexities you can term it in three ways. One is there is a geopolitical competition there. Then there is a geo-economic competition, it's oil-rich, very rich region, or there is a geo-religious competition also. So when all these three among themselves are playing out, it is very difficult to see them coming together. But I'm happy that at least they are looking at their own security in one way or the other. That let us try to work together, reduce the threshold for conflict. Now, if that happens, then obviously these countries will have much to gain. Today, you know, Saudi Arabia is the largest importer of weapons in the world. What for? Iran has the maximum number of the missiles, nuclear power. Iran is a nuclear power. So it is a very dangerous region. From India's point of view, it is the most important geography. It is the most strategic neighborhood, which we cannot do away with. I mean, I sometimes feel that it is even more important than our immediate neighborhood, because our energy security is dependent on them. Our maritime security is dependent through their sea lines of communications, trade and all. We have diaspora more than 9 million, which sends about $40–50 billion to India every year, which is 10% of your foreign exchange. We need fertilizer, food security, everything comes from the Middle East for us. So we have to be extremely cautious that there is no conflict does not go beyond a point. So as long as there is a rapprochement, there is some kind of an understanding among all major players that let's try and work together, because pandemic has impacted everyone. And Russia-Ukraine war has also impacted badly most of the non-oil producing countries. So it is a time that they think about it, and that's precisely what they're thinking. My worry is that now, when the Americans again come in and they try to divide them one way or the other, or the Chinese or the Russians try to divide them, this is what may be a downside of this whole thing.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughts. It was a wonderful interview. It was very informative, and your opinions and your thoughts and ideas will be of great importance to the youngsters who will be watching this interview in the future through the YouTube and our other social media channels. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.